My name's Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Jimmy, what weekend is it?
September 10th, 2019.
That's the day we're recording, on a Tuesday, man. This weekend is going to be SPX weekend, 25th anniversary of the Small Press Expo, and we are guests. I'm going to be on the floor running around, copping interviews. You're going to have a table at that joint.
Looking forward to it, man. That's the show that I've done the most of any show, and I realized, like, leading up to it, 25th anniversary, we're probably going to see a mention of it pretty soon in Wizard, because we're in 1994. I was a little disappointed we haven't got to it yet. It would have been perfectly timed, but it'll be coming up. I'm sure that's something that Tom Palmer or the Wizard News or something will cover. So pretty cool, 25 years.
We noticed in issue 1 of our Wizard coverage, the name Greg McElhatton, and he became part of like the Wizard, the SPX board, or, one of the administrative types behind the scenes. There's a lot of like retrospective SPX stuff floating around on Facebook, various social media platforms, and this really just came to mind, man. So like, we will cut it out if it's sandbagging in any way. But there was a video from 2003 there, and I swear to God, the camera was on you, and you had a fully shaved head.
Yeah, that's right.
That is right. Okay, yeah, because it looks so odd. I've never seen that, and I'm like, oh man, I hope that's Jim, because if it's not, and it's like one of your enemies or something, I don't want to hurt your feelings.
No, not at all. I've gone through shaved head periods in my life.
I don't like it. I don't like it, man. It's very upsetting. It was upsetting to me.
Sometimes it starts with a mohawk for a while, and then it gets to the shaved head.
Man, even with those aviators, we're going to put you on a damn FBI watch list with that shit.
Yeah, that's a great video. I wish there was more documentation. There probably is a little bit more, but I've seen that video before, and I wish there was more of that. Like, better video documentation of those early SPXs would be really amazing. That's going to be some of the fun when we get into the first couple of year coverage of those, seeing like who the guests are, because that's like Spirits of Independence, Frank Miller, Jeff Smith, Dave Sim, Dave Lapham. I think Evan Dorkin was at early SPXs. So it's a fun history, man. 25 years is, you go through a lot of cartoonists. You have cartoonists that go through that cycle of like, they're there with mini comics, cut to 15 years later, and they're huge selling authors.
Right.
You come to mind.
You know who else? I was thinking like that Eric Powell guy. He had the Goon real early, and I remember meeting him at SPX. Seeing that video with you with the shaved head, of which I've never seen before, solidifies when I first went to SPX, which would have been the very next year with you guys.
Was the first SPX you went to in the building that we're in, that it's in now?
No, it was in the Holiday Inn or whatever, like in Bethesda proper, where all the good food is.
With all of the rooms, there were like 4 rooms.
Yeah, like 3
okay,
rooms.
That's what that video is from. That was such a weird venue, because I had nothing to compare it to. I had heard of SPX, and so whenever I showed up there, it was like, there was very little any kind of like social presence. So you might see a message board about what somebody picked up, but there's no sense of like the space you're going into. And that was such kind of an odd convention, because I think it grew out of one room into several, and then it was like, there'd be like one room that was kind of in a corner, considered a bad room. I think I was in that room the first year.
You were in that room. You were in that room when I went with you guys, man. In that back piece, you were definitely. We'll say that you were the star of that room.
Big fish in a very tiny pond. I have so many good memories from when that show was in that location. It was there for several years that I would go, and it's like, man, I found a lot of the mini comics that I still think about today. I can remember Tom Devlin from Highwater Books would be set up, and he'd also have like a table of like Fort Thunder stuff, like just really interesting screen printed minis, things that I would never see anywhere else. Like the Catastrophe guys we've talked about before out of St. Louis. I remember buying Brian Ralph mini comics. So after Cave-In, like I knew of his work and stuff, and I would hear about his minis, and I can remember buying like Crumb Bums, and he'd be like 100-page mini comics, like the real little, like quarter-page size mini comics, but like 100 pages. Like I don't even know how you would staple them, and it was like this little graphic novel. It was such a cool, very eye-opening as to like, wow, you can make essentially a graphic novel in this format.
On the Bootleg Comics episode that we did way back when, we are rapidly approaching our 1-year anniversary of the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. I think October 5th is going to be when we created the actual channel, and I think the first video appeared in November 5th. I think.
Oh yeah, we record right. Yeah.
I think that's how that played out. We recorded for like 5 weeks before we put one out. We were like antsy the entire time, like, man, let's gang these up so that we could start putting them out. We needed a queue, and we reliably put out a fresh video every week. for almost a year. But that first SPX from the bootleg episode that we did, there was the Wolverine Kitty Pryde versus Zombies, and that made its debut at the SPX that I went to, 2004. And I recently saw on Twitter that Brett Warnock is divesting him, so he owned all the original art to that.
Yeah.
And he's selling all that stuff off, man.
I thought about reaching out to him, but I'm just not in the market for that right now, unfortunately. Yeah. It's amazing he has the whole issue. I hope he sells it all intact to somebody. Keep that together. That's one of the great mini comics. That was one of those ones that I still cherish in my collection of mini comics.
Yeah, so we reliably put out a video every week for pretty much the past year. We decided to flip the script a little bit, man. Did a live stream version of Wizard 28.
That was fun, and let's be honest, we had done live stream recordings for a little while, and it's funny, it feels like it was last month, but it was probably 6 months ago. It was early in the process. I can remember doing that, and there's some overhead issues we had, so we moved away from that. But very fun to go back to the live stream, and I feel like from time to time we'll do live stream videos. I mean, I know we do the inking, but it's fun to kind of do one live and actually have some interaction with chatters, and especially if it's flipping through comics or something that we're going to have some questions about, it's kind of nice to have the chatters there live, being able to fill in gaps.
Yeah, for sure. Like whenever we're spacing out on what is that B word that is just like heavyweight in the bow of a ship, and comics were used for it, and on British vessels, and then just a million people, ballast, shows up in the chat room, ballast. I have some takeaways technically, and because that was part of the spirit of why we did that is we want to refine that process. I would suggest that we do a Kayfabe live kind of thing whenever we hit 10K. We're not far from it. We need about 600 or 500 more people to subscribe to the channel, and then why not do like a live gimmick and interact with the chat room that way or something, or maybe for the 1 year anniversary. We'll figure something out. Couple takeaways, man. We sometimes use an iPod to do recording. The audio is better on that. Like I got the brand new iPhone, and I went back and checked out the stuff. The newest technology from Apple, like the sound does not record as well. We were the same distance from the object, and it was like that when we did the live recordings. Like the iPods record better than the iPhones, which you would hope would have superior audio since you're talking to people on that thing.
Yeah, plus you're paying a little more.
Yeah, that's for goddamn sure. So like that was part of the gimmick, like just to test things out so that we could see what works best and what doesn't. And I have some good takeaways from when we do future live streams and stuff.
It's funny to think about us approaching 1 year, because I feel like this entire year, I always, whenever somebody asks me about it, it's kind of like, well, we're still figuring this out, we're trying new stuff, and it feels like we're still in that mode. From what we show, what we talk about, any of these approaches, it still feels very new. Like there's a lot of things we haven't done yet that we've talked about doing, or just a lot to uncover also. I go through some of my odd-shaped boxes, and it's like, we could do a show on this, we could do a show on that. So it still feels like we're just getting started, but it's amazing to think we're, a month away from an anniversary here.
This is a long game to me, and I'm going to continue growing this baby as much as possible, man. Like, imagine what it's going to look like in 10 years,
That's a good exercise. That's something I don't do enough of, is really step back and think, like, how do I want this to look? How, what do I want my workflow to be like? All of these things. And it's something I could benefit from doing. I've done it in the past with some stuff, but I don't do it often enough. And this is a good example of it. I'm not thinking that far ahead. And maybe that's what this is, a moment for me to stop and think about, like, what do I want out of this channel? What do I want it to be? How do I want it to work?
Part of what the reason why I wanted to do this thing in the first place is because I'm a cartoonist, and I make comic books. And it just so happens now that the landscape of comics we exist in, it's a book market. 100-page books at the very least. In fact, if you talk to an agent and you approach them with a 100-page book, they'll tell you, go add 50 pages to that, because publishers don't know how to price a 100-page thing, man. You're going to take a year to make a comic at the very least. Out of sight, out of mind in the modern day culture. So we got to keep our presence up as much as possible, doing those live stream inking sessions. The Kayfabers really dig, like, being in on the ground floor, watching a thing develop. This is something that I learned from the Hip Hop Family Tree exercise, where I was just like posting up pencils and inks and putting up a new strip every week. And routinely people would hit me up in the comments or in my DMs and stuff like, man, I just bought the book and I can't believe like I seen the first page like in pencil form and junk like that,
Right.
man. So it's a different thing, man. And I always think of my books as like, they're kind of like, they are considered intellectual property. And I think of them as like mini companies or something. Like I'm building everybody, the exercise of modern day business is like you build a company big enough to sell it. And that's how I think about these books. I'm in this as a career, you know what I mean? Everybody else could go be artists, man, but I'm keeping my head above water with this game. So it's like, let me build this company, let me build this property, and when I get a big enough audience, then that's when the book comes out, because now there are people ready for it. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me at all to just disappear, announce a thing like at a San Diego Comic-Con amongst 1,000 other announcements, and to cold drop something that nobody knew they even knew that they needed.
Yeah, and man, we've seen so many cartoonists do it that way, and it's just, I tell people, like, you build your craft, right? Like, everybody thinks, of course, you draw, you work on your comics, you build a craft, takes 10 years. You build the audience too. Like, that audience doesn't show up the day the book is done. That audience, it just doesn't happen overnight. The same way your craft doesn't happen overnight. It's interesting. It's interesting to see your approach, Ed, for posting stuff, pages, pencil pages, the whole process, because it feels like companies still don't do that.
No.
By waiting to sell it until you've got this audience, one, it's advantageous to you. It's a more valuable property if a lot of people are interested. But also, like, once it's sold, how many of these companies' policy is like, don't post all that stuff? And it's like, why not? Because there are examples of this. I think it was Diary of a Wimpy Kid. One of those books was like 4 million first printing. It was all online for free.
Yeah.
Like, clearly, that's not an impediment to sales. Would it have sold 8 million if it wasn't online for free? Like, what is happening? But it's still not like the precedent. Like, it's not, if you think of something like the NBA or one of these big operating, very public type companies, those guys, it's like every player is on every social media. They have a presence. It's almost like they're ambassadors. You don't see it as much with these comic companies, and it's hard for me to understand why not. Like, you're the same deal. Like, why wouldn't you have all of these freelancers just advertising for your product all the time?
Yeah, in our game, the most successful people do just that. So this is the dark side of SPX that I sort of took away when I went to that very first SPX in 2004, because I am in a room full of people. I see a lot of hive mind, like people want to be part of the pack, so I seen a lot of examples of what to do wrong. Everybody in that space was like a friend, and I seen a lot of like bad logic that there was, say, precedent set with somebody who might have had like the most respect of the crew, so everybody would do kind of the same thing, and just from a position of total ignorance, not being a part of that culture at all, I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to be able to master this game. Like, that was so influential to me, because I'm like, oh, everybody's fucking up. I got to meet some of my heroes there. And I think some of my heroes, should be on pedestals, and they should be able to, like, drive a Hummer down their driveway just to pick up the newspaper and drive that shit back. And it's like, well, why
That fits a cartoonist personality.
Why aren't they in that position? And I get to meet them and, like, have a real conversation with them. And it's like, oh, not only that, everybody is like a part of like this kind of like hive mind and afraid to like breach that for fear of like losing respect of the crew. There's a lot of situations where the cartoonist is their own worst enemy, and so like I was young going to that show, and I saw that, and it's like, now I'm going to be a guest at this SPX, and I'm going to be an old fucker. And so there's like a new generation of youngins, man, who are like looking at us like, man, they're doing a lot of flawed stuff. And the first time I really felt that was when we went to that one Heroes Con, and there was all those web cartoonists who had giant followings, had nothing to do with the direct market, and they had audiences out the door. Man, immediately I went home. Like, if you go on my Twitter and see when Eddie P like grabbed his Twitter account, it was that Sunday night or that Monday.
That was an eventful ride home.
Yeah,
A lot of conversation about what we need to be doing.
And me and Tom, man, we picked. He got ambarb.com, I got WYSIWYGcomics.com, and we immediately got to work by growing our audiences online, and it freaking bore fruit, man. Like, you know, I think there were like 3 different printings of his American Barbarian. There were a couple of my WYSIWYG things.
I think that's a real practical piece too. You know, we get lots of these questions about what to do at shows, how to sell their books and stuff. If you're coming to SPX as a young cartoonist, that's what to look around for. See the models that are working and that kind of are where you want to be, and study those models.
Right.
I think we've been doing that pretty much from the beginning. You know, like we go to these shows, you see what stands out, and then it's just like, okay, let's take this apart on the ride home. How do we fold this into our practice?
Right. Super cool stuff, man. I think it's going to be a good weekend. A lot of cool guests are going to be there. Jaime's going to be there. Eleanor Davis is going to be there.
New book by Eleanor Davis is debuting there like ahead of time. I think it comes out in October. I forget the name of it, of course, but I saw that D&Q will have some copies of it. So one of my favorite cartoonists.
Yeah, Chris Ware's going to be there with the new Rusty Brown as well. And I bet we'll be able to get copies of free shit. I should go to the Fanta table and just talk to them and let them know that we have a very robust audience, and to give us a crate of books to come home and to put under the microscope. Because I believe Charles Burns' Free Shit is a Fantagraphics book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's on my short list. Want to talk some Fantagraphics books?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we have one piece of mail came in, and you can reach us through email via cartoonist.kayfabe@gmail.com. And this email is from Aaron, and he says, I was wondering if he hears us rave about Fantagraphics books. And he was wondering, besides Hip Hop and Love and Rockets, if we could advise some must-read Fantagraphics books and series, because they have such a big catalog. Looking for recommendations for Fantagraphics books.
You see behind my head? You see behind this Raiders shield right there? That very first book, that's the complete 8-ball. You're going to want to get that.
Yeah, that was the first one I was going to go to. Dan Klaus has a few books available through Fantagraphics. Certainly 8-ball is a good place to start. But also there are cheaper book versions of several of the stories from there. So, you know, Ghost World, Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, David Boring. I think David Boring's Fantagraphics. No,
that's a Pantheon.
Pussy is Fantagraphics.
Yeah.
Patience, Fantagraphics,
Definitely,
I think.
Yeah.
So I would say anything from Dan Klaus would be something I'd recommend. He's a cartoonist that's had a big influence on me, and certainly has a big chunk of his body of work is available from Fantagraphics. They are so broad that we can go in a lot of different directions. So they reprint a lot of cartoonists. You know, what's their tagline? Publishers of the greatest...
Of the world's greatest cartoonists.
There you go. So they have like publishing EC artists in dedicated volumes. I would recommend guys like Harvey Kurtzman, Johnny Craig, Bernie Kriegstein are some of my favorites. I shouldn't take for granted guys like Wally Wood and sort of like that big, I hate to say A-list, but I feel like some of those guys are bigger than the EC line. So get those guys too, like Wally Wood.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like some of the stuff that I dig the most. Obviously, behind my head, you see the Peanuts back there. Any of it, like grab some volumes from the 60s for sure. That's good stuff. And the Carl Barks books.
That was another one
are
I was
incredible
gonna say.
For the modern era. I don't know how accessible issues of like hate are, but I recommend Peter Bagg comics. That's upper echelon comics to me. Super funny.
It's true too, because some of this stuff you will encounter in different places. You know, like a hate comic, you may find in back issue diving.
I think they might have put together some big omnibuses and shit like that, now that I recall. And I think there is a complete neat stuff. So that's a comic that stands the test of time and is in a nice kind of like slipcase 8-ball kind of edition.
We talk a lot about original art. We've shown a couple of artist editions. One of the cooler like collections of original art is that Blighted Eye, the Glenn Bray collection. So he's an art collector that's taste runs like an amazingly broad collection of stuff. And they put out a nice big hardcover collection of I guess some of his collection, not all of it, but it's probably 500 pages or something, great reproduction, and just a very wide sampling. So if you're into original art, that's kind of a nice place to start. It's almost like an anthology of an artist edition or something.
Yeah, as a brand, Fantagraphics holds up, and you could do far worse than grab any random Fantagraphics comic and give it a try, man.
I was going to say comics journals, like almost any comics journal will be entertaining and will have some stuff that will surprise you. So if you come across those somewhere in a magazine box, grab a couple of those. If the cover grabs you, give them a shot.
Yeah. Earlier the better in a lot of ways, because there's a very dark period in the aughts that was really weak.
Yeah, I think that's when I had my subscription. Hey, you take what you can get.
It might have been super late 90s, I forget, but it was like so Byzantine and complicated, and it was just a bunch of guys in a academic pissing contest that it's like, okay, you guys are challenging me to even read a paragraph.
Yeah, I think it lost its direction for a little bit, and I think it actually kind of came back together again. For Comics Journal back issues, like I always recommend if you get a year-end review issue, like I would find so many books that way because it'd be like the best, 10 comics of the year or something, and they would survey different cartoonists and different people to kind of submit their lists. So you'd get kind of a nice selection. And in the 90s, like you get a pretty good representation of like what the best books were that year. Like now it's impossible to think of like, here's the 12 best comics of this year, of this week even might be a challenge because there's so much stuff. But back then you could get a pretty good survey, pick up a best of issue.
One of the things that comes up in the chat room fairly often is the top 100 comics of the 20th century, or was that how the list was described?
I think so, yeah.
And it will come up a lot. So it's like, all right, man, I guess you guys are going to challenge us to do like a 10-part series, do 10 at a time or something.
That's a really fun list to look at because it's kind of like right before comics broke through in whatever way they've broken through this century. And so it's of a time, like it's a real-time capsule. That would be fun to go through, and it would be fun to start thinking about like what's a top 100 list look like now?
Yeah.
Because it's just what we have access to now. It'd be hard to put together that list, but it would be very interesting to see the results of it.
I wonder where the email came from, because we may take it for granted or not. Maybe every library system has a robust graphic novel section at this point. And that's the thing that I would probably recommend most, man, is go hit the library.
That's true. That's very true.
Give something a shot. And if it sticks with you, go buy that son of a bitch, man.
Yeah, or dig further. Like once you have a couple of titles that you like, it's much easier to find. Like if you like Clowes, maybe you'll like Charles Burns, for instance. Just a couple of other artists I'd recommend is like Jim Woodring is a guy that I've really enjoyed his comics, and Fantagraphics has quite a few of those. Jason, the Norwegian cartoonist, I think is a phenomenal cartoonist.
Great.
Katie Skelly, friend of the show, Katie Skelly has several books from Fantagraphics. Joe Sacco is another. And finally, my favorite thing is Monsters. Emil Ferris's book, ballpoint pen art, beautiful monsters. It's a lovely book. It's gotten a lot of attention the last couple of years and very well deserved. So I think that's a start. Good luck, Aaron.
You have your marching orders. So we talk about the publisher of the world's greatest cartoonists. Can we talk about one of the world's greatest comic book shops?
Yes.
We got a cool video that was sent to us from our pals down under. Mitch from All Star Comics in Melbourne, freaking Australia.
Yeah, we need to do a Kayfabe episode from this store because they look like they're well suited to it.
Yeah, bring our asses out there, man. Get some Chamber of Commerce money to bring the Kings of Kayfabe to your town.
I like this video a lot. I was really impressed. They do a good job of showcasing both the physical space of the store, which looks great. We were talking about Strange Adventures when we were in Halifax and how nice that store looked, both of his stores that we saw. And that's something I think about more and more now as I see stores, because some of them really are designed where it's like, this is a great space to be in. And I think All Star Comics mentions it early on, like that's by design. Their store is very consciously designed and looks great. So that was something that stood out to me, but also like how that store is positioned in the community. Like they have
Super
outdoor
important.
events, they do, big events for things like Free Comic Book Day, they organize public events of cosplay, I guess. But I like all of that community stuff, and I was thinking as I watched the video, they have their sections, indie, a lot of emphasis on local cartoonists, and I was shocked by the size of their local cartoonist, like what they were showcasing. Seemed like there must be a pretty good scene there. Kids section, of course. Vintage toys, which I'm not a toy guy, but displayed in cases like that, it's almost like a little museum. It's a really nice thing, and it made me think like this store would service any kind of comics fan, but if I drug my wife along or a non-comics reader, I think they would be pretty comfortable in that space too, which is not always the case. A lot to see in that store. Yeah, whenever a store goes above and beyond with just even the decor, that's something worth noting. And they had these like custom sections, these titles at the top of bookshelves, DC, Vertigo. Man, I hope it didn't cost you that much money now that you have to take those down. But it's like an Art Deco kind of... I think one of those guys built those. Do you think they were laser cut? Oh, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it still needs erected and everything, but looked pretty smooth. And I just can't imagine a guy doing that with a bandsaw. Yeah, right. Looked really cool. But Mitch, the proprietor of that shop, he was on the committee with me in 2015 whenever we were judging the best retailer of the year award. And I wonder if he won it the year before, or I guess they probably have one shop owner per grouping or whatever. Yeah, that would make sense. Cool guy. And let's show off the store real quick, Jim.
Hi, I'm Mitch.
And I'm Troy.
Welcome to All Star Comics Melbourne.
We hope you enjoy your tour of the store.
At All Star, Troy and Mitch have tried to keep the space as open as possible.
We wanted it to be a comfortable space for people to just hang out, enjoy the books.
The main wall in their store is dedicated to single issues, sectioned by publisher and arranged alphabetically.
We try to keep an extensive range of new stock.
So we generally have at least 2 to 4 months worth of the new titles on the shelf, trying to make it as easy as possible that when people are looking for the titles they're after, they can find at least the last couple of issues of the titles they want.
A main focus for the boys has been the local comic book community, and space is dedicated in the store to this.
We felt that if we could have them on the shelf side by side, the books being produced from the US, that people might sort of take notice of it a little bit more rather than having a local section sort of hidden away in a corner somewhere.
We're extremely proud of the fact that we have one of the widest ranges of Australian products of any store in Australia.
It's not really unusual at all for the local creators to meet up in the store and use it as a place to network with other creators and have it as a place to sort of talk about new and future projects together, which is really great.
All Star also boasts a wide range of trade paperbacks, arranged alphabetically by publisher, with new releases and popular titles merch face forward.
If we have issue with people actually not being able to find what they're after, we try as much as possible just to order it in for them and have it back in the next week.
The store design has a strong Art Deco influence, with Troy having built the majority of the fixtures, including the counter. Half the counter is used to serve customers, and the other half is used as a place for people to look over their purchases and check their standing orders. The counter also acts as another focal point for comics and merchandise.
We get all the latest release books on the top 2 shelves, and then we get the kids' single issues on the next 2 shelves at a kid-friendly height.
It also boasts a kids section to help out parents and kids in the store,
making it super easy for them to look through.
The Art Deco theme carries on to the towers throughout the store.
It's nice to have a spotlight area for latest trades, as well as a spotlight for older books, such as the showcase books and the essentials.
All Star also sell new and vintage toys in the store.
We find that this is a kind of a cooler sort of thing to have rather than just brand new toy stock. This also sort of makes for a bit of a talking point of the store, as if it's almost a bit of a toy museum, which is kind of cool.
There are several chairs and armchairs throughout the store for customers, as well as partners and families in the store.
It gives them a chance just to chill out and kick back.
Since opening, All Star has played host to a whole heap of in-store events.
We've had local book launches, crowdfunding campaign launches, panels, Q&As, book signings, and live podcast recordings. We even had our own table tennis competition.
It's a great way of having that sense of community thriving within the actual store's walls, which is great.
All Star has arranged several out-of-store events, like costume walks to celebrate Superman and Batman.
Just helping promote comics and basically trying to raise awareness of comics to a much wider audience than just the regulars.
They sponsor events as well. The biggest event in the All-Star calendar is Free Comic Book Day, which grew this year to include free sketches from over 30 local artists.
We also stepped it up by working with the local council to close down a nearby laneway and created more of a festival atmosphere.
People just off the street were getting to see local artists at work, coming up and finding out more about the local industry, which was great.
At All-Star, social media is used to promote local events and groups, as well as in-store events and competitions. Social media is also used to interact with customers, answer questions, and help out with orders.
This makes it feel a little bit more like you're dealing with a friend rather than just a business.
All-Star Comics use branding to build a strong sense of community.
This really can work through things like promotional images, in-store promotions, but even the t-shirts that we have available.
With our t-shirts, we wanted it to have like a band-like connotation, so that when you see people wearing the same shirt when you're out and about, you already have an instant connection with them.
A great way to get people involved has been the All-Star Art Bag, inspired by some great incentives by other stores, like the Isotopes signed toilet seats.
It's a great feeling when someone buys something and then asks for one of the bags and then asks if they can draw on one and bring it into the store. We showcase this both in-store and online, and our customers love it. Well, we hope you enjoyed your tour as much as we've enjoyed building the store.
It's a wonderful place to work, and we hope that we've been able to showcase the things that we love about it. Thanks again. It's actually a massive, ridiculous honour to just be nominated.
Thanks very much, and we hope to see you guys in store soon.
Yeah, they have to have us come out there, dude.
Yes.
So guys, we don't want to stop showing off these videos, and we do have like a small queue.
Yes.
But I would like to keep the backlog going so that we can show off a fresh comic shop every single week. Once again, we're offensive players.
I love this, man. It's a virtual comic shop tour, which is awesome because there's nothing I love more than a comic shop. And look, I've never been to Australia, so if you don't send me that video, I don't get to see that store. So keep those coming in for sure.
Super juiced up, man, from the experience up there in Nova Scotia, and just realizing like there are a lot of shop owners who are keeping this little culture of ours alive, and we need to do everything we can to just get the word out about cool comic shops, man. So Kayfabers, if you know that your store send in a submission video to the Eisners or whatever, if they have like a cool tour video online, get express permission, have that sent to us, or send it to us yourselves with the express permission so that we can highlight these shops on future Kayfabe Weekly.
Yeah, and if your store doesn't have that online yet and you're prone to making this kind of stuff, talk to them and work with them and make a little 2-minute video. Show off your local store. And by the way, if you're watching this and you found comics through your library, through online mail order or whatever conventions, look around for a local comic shop, because you might be surprised if there's one in your city or some something that you've overlooked. I'm often surprised by the number of shops when I start digging anywhere I go. I can usually find one. So look it up. There's a I think it's called Local Comic Shop Locator or something. You may have to Google that, but you can enter a zip code and it'll basically give you a map of the nearest shops. So do a search, man. That's a fun. Finding a new shop is always a good time.
There's so much that's needed beyond just the simple commerce of the comic shop. And I'm talking, like, it sort of piggybacks along what we were just saying a little bit earlier, whereas creators, like, just doing the work that's not all you could do or should do. And the best retailers, the most successful retailers that I've come in contact with in the past decade and a half, they do have a strong presence in the community, and I see that as being totally crucial, man.
I see a lot of comic shops that work with their libraries. Mm-hmm. It's rather than thinking of this as like libraries maybe taking away sales, maybe a couple, but I don't think so long term. I think they may be creating long-term readers and consumers. But I see a lot of that, like I'll do a library talk and it'll be a local comic shop that'll be handling book sales at the event. So I think a lot of those shops do, reach out. They do build those connections with local communities. Sometimes they set up at events, like we have Pinburg and the video game, the arcade thing at the convention center. There's usually a comics retailer at those things. So they get out and about. And speaking of comic shops, while we're on the subject, this is the week for final order cutoff for Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive from Image Comics. So go to your local comic shop, tell them to order like 20 of them. Doing a Cartoonist Kayfabe panel at SPX. So if you're at SPX on Saturday between 1 and 2 p.m. in the White Oak Room, we will be up there talking, I guess, indie comics, Cartoonist Kayfabe indie style.
Man, that's awesome, because that means I really can sleep till noon. I think I'll do a signing at Fanta right after that, and then that's it for my responsibilities on Saturday, dude. I really do plan on scooping people up and putting them in front of the hot lights as much as possible. You know, one thing I was thinking about super late last night, and I'm going to actually text the guy when we get the heck out of here, but what if we get Gary Groth, like, in front of the hot lights, and one of the questions will be, tell us everything you remember about the McFarlane interview. We interviewed him before for TMS IDK, but we have a brand now.
Yeah, you need to email him a few preparatory questions. Look up your Tim Vigil. Refresh your Tim Vigil history. I'm gonna get some outlaw insights from the publisher of the world's greatest cartoonist.
The other thing that I'm curious about it would be the fact that he's from that region. So when you come back and you revisit, like, what kind of memories does this bring back up to you? Did you know Steve Geppy, the mailman?
Yeah, I was thinking that whenever you mentioned the region, because Bill Boychelle, who we have interviewed, is from that area and told some stories. So there should be some overlap in terms of comics community that those guys. That'll be fun.
Yeah, ran a con called MetroCon in the DC region, and then had for 1 or 2 years did like a rock and roll convention. His idea was like, yeah, the comic thing is nice, but what if we have the same thing, but bring Ronnie James Dio or somebody, man. He wasn't able to get anybody of note like within the music game, but he did bring Hunter Thompson, and he has some stories.
Yeah, that was something in that previous interview that was really exciting to hear about Hunter Thompson and influence on a young Gary Groth.
Right, makes all the sense in the world.
That's Hunter S. Thompson's one of those guys that I feel like is such a huge influence on so much, but because we're younger, we always were in the shadow of that influence and don't recognize like what that was. Like, we're rock star journalists at a time when journalism was under fire like it is now. Like, it's pretty interesting to think about how profound his influence was.
And there's a lot of comic book stuff that came from that, for sure. Certainly his collaborations with Ralph Steadman.
Yeah, obviously.
And that influenced your favorite New Mutants comics, essentially.
I love connecting the dots that way. That's great.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, I really have to thank the crew, the Brain Trust, man, for dropping a ton of recommendations on splatterpunk books, movies, comics. I just got my Rex Miller Chain Gang paperback. It's right over there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's very distracting.
It's designed really beautifully.
I know.
Die cut cover. You see the opening of a jail cell door, and then when you open that up, man, there's a painting of this like blob-faced, ugly, pockmarked dude. And then there's even just interesting design stuff with the typography on the inside, because there will be form letters and junk like that are like incorporated into the story. I always love whenever that was done in old novels and shit, where they would just play around with the design for storytelling purposes.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that book, and then eventually to get my hands on the book.
Yeah, cool.
It seems like a genre that's going to be a lot of fun to explore.
Yeah, just the first. Like the sentence that pitches the thing on the back, it's like 500 pounds of murder.
Yeah, it's amazing.
He like just got out of prison and he's hungry. First he's going to get some chicken, and then he wants to eat a heart or something like that. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing.
It does feel so in line with the outlaw comics.
Yeah. It's like, is it outlaw writing? Is Faust a splatterpunk comic? It all blurs. The lines all blur, man. And I was just imagining, dude, whenever my book comes out, and you have like those two choices of the subtitle, like next to the indicia, like, you know, the barcode, splatterpunk outlaw, splatterpunk.
That's great.
You know, fraction sign, outlaw.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Ed. Any process stories from this week? Any drawing stories?
Yeah, you know what? I did a live stream, and that's where, did we mention the Super Chatters?
No.
Okay, yeah. So I did I did a live stream this week. I got one page done so far. We're recording a couple days early in preparation for our travels with SPX. And first off, let me just like flash the super chatters up on the screen because we got more than 24 this past week, man. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. It's all going to a good cause, man. And hopefully you'll hear better audio in the future, see better video. And as things progress, man, shit is just going to get more and more fly. Dude, I'm really pushing things, man. I got the Spawn Vault Edition #2. I got, like, you know, the run of the Max comics. I got all sorts of stuff I'm looking at for the panel compositions and for playing around with that shit. And the one common ground that I see between, like, a Hewlett, Sam Keith, McFarlane, like, these kind of, like, bombastic artists, if you think you pushed it enough, you haven't. You could accelerate things even further and push the energy even further and make it even more exciting. So I've been doing like multiple iterations of these panels and these pages to just try to find like the best approach that's like simply the most fun looking but not betray storytelling. Like the storytelling is paramount to me, but I really do think that you could marry very, very exciting imagery with good flow and still tell the story in that as elegant a way as you would using the grid.
I agree 100%. Whenever we went through that Spawn Vault Edition 1, that was something it just reaffirms. Like his page layouts were so bold. Maybe the storytelling wasn't as clear, but you know, I mean, that's what it is. You take pieces. You know, you go, well, I want the clear storytelling, but I want those dynamic page layouts, and that is something that's kind of fallen out of favor maybe or something. For some reason in the early 90s there was a lot of that, and I don't see it as much anymore. Even we just posted Tim Truman's Dragon Chang. A lot of like the very thin horizontal and vertical panels, I just don't think that way. So it is nice to kind of refresh you know, ideas on what you take for granted, right? Like I've done a lot of work on the grid. Go look at these comics that aren't on the grid. We just looked at Tyrant, Steve Bissett's Tyrant. That's another one of those pages are just like every page is laid out differently, and it's amazing, you know. So like, how can you use those page layouts in a storytelling way?
Those Kubrick guys, they do not betray storytelling.
No.
So their stuff flows great, and that's also been a big influence. But I must say that it is an adjustment. You know, I've been using the grid for 15 years. You know what I'm saying? Like when I was a kid, I was very excited to do crazy panel things. And the submission guidelines are like, no, like step back. And in fact, this will break kayfabe a little bit, but talking with my editor, Chris Robinson, when I was a guest at New York Comic Con last year or the year before, whenever that was, we finished a talk or something, and then he went off, had to do submission reviews. That's something that they do, like New York or San Diego. And I asked him, like, what are you looking for? Like what will stand out to you? And one of the things that's like super important to him when it comes to somebody who's green, just getting into the game, is the grid. Like follow the grid. Like if you start playing around too much, you're too much of an X factor for us to use you because we don't know what we're going to get back. Like if we get something far too complicated and then now you upset our entire print schedule because I have to make you go back and redraw pages. So you want, professionally, you want somebody who abides by the grid to start.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
How about you with the running gimmick, man?
Man, I had a good day yesterday of drawing. I had a lot of time to actually draw, which doesn't always happen. Sounds good, but I am still learning like the mechanics of the running stuff. And it's so weird because like we draw figures in comics as long as we've been drawing comics.
Yeah.
But now it's like, okay, learn to draw them dynamically running, and it's almost like a new creature or something. So you start out with a lot of reference, and it's just drawing of people running, and then removing the reference and trying to like make up your own figures running in different perspectives and start foreshortening them. So I did a lot of that yesterday. I did pencil a page, so I'm hoping to jump on a live stream here in the next day or two. Hopefully before we get to SPX, I'll get a chance to ink another page. So it's coming along. It's not coming along as quickly as I would like, but that's what happens with the first couple of pages. You know, you're still kind of figuring out, learning the ropes, so to speak. But I have a page ready to go, so maybe tomorrow.
That's awesome, dude. I'm going to be heading to Japan in the not too distant future. And regarding this comic that I'm working on, 2 pages a week would be nice. but I've created a situation where I can afford to take my time a little bit, and I'm going to be working on it constantly. But if I don't nail the pencils at first, like then it all falls apart. So I'm really taking my time at that stage, and I'm penciling really small, and then just blowing it up, and then going pretty much straight to ink. But I'm not. I'm just not binding myself to a rigid clock. That's another benefit of like not signing up with a publisher yet. I have 8 pages done. That's a quarter of the first issue is finished already.
Right.
That kind of blows my mind. You know, like it's these like little victories. When I finish one more page, this page that I have to work on tonight, that's a complete initial scene, and then I'm going to be able to do the reading and serialize it on the Kayfabe channel, create like a new playlist and do a little reading. And I was thinking about how can I still like get the complete pages like to the reader so that they could read at their own leisure or whatever. And I happened upon this site. It's called like Imgur or IMGUR, something like that. And you could just have like a cascading, endless kind of amount of imagery that you could post, a bunch of JPEGs. And I think I might, put those 9 pages up there, like kind of like in a row, and just have the link like in the description so that if you don't want to hear my damn voice, you could read it at your own leisure. But I think that's going to be the move, and I'm going to be pretty excited to show it off, because when I do that, I can let you know the title, and I can let you see what it's about, because a lot of people are like, this is weird, like what is this thing, man, like it's so random, but I think it'll be clear, even though that first issue is really going to be just opening doors, man, and you don't know what's going to be on the inside of that mother effer.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the pencils, got to get the pencils right, of course. I felt that way when we were in the writing stages, where it's like, that's the foundation. You get the writing right, and then you have the freedom to kind of like whatever, it's like the structure is in place. But I'm finding the same stuff with the pencils, where it's like you have to get that figured out. I've been approaching the penciling, thinking about the penciling the way you have kind of been like, it's structure. It's almost John Buscema or something. If you've ever seen John Buscema pencils, it's like everything you need is there as an inker, as an illustrator, as a finisher, and nothing else. It's all like structure is perfect, but then, it's up to the inker to fill in kind of the finished illustration part. And I want to approach the drawing that same way, where you get the energy of the inking stage, where like the inking is the drawing, the penciling is kind of the storytelling, it's the structure,
right?
And then from there, it's like, okay, now put your drawing hat on. This has been a fun process.
Yeah, like when it comes to the different components to making comics, like I really do think of it as like putting on different hats, and when you are lettering the page, it's like you got to try to be the best. You got to try to beat Todd Klein, man. You got to try to beat Tom Warzakowski, or at least
get to be excited,
be able to sit at the table.
Yes,
you got to at least be able to sit at the table, man. How about that great at the Ringos last year, Ben, when we formulated the idea for Cartoonist Kayfabe, man? We were like little girls, man. You and I sitting here, Todd Klein is right behind us, and I'm like, Jimmy, I'm going in, man. You could come along if you want to or not, man. I'm going in. And then just like tap to tap, Mr. Klein, where do you have your Ames lettering guide set whenever you hand the letter? And then that got the ball rolling, man. Great
that's a great icebreaker for a letter.
Yeah, totally. And he warmed up. And also, I really liked that he dissed everybody else at his table and just like flipped around. And it was like, yeah, that's the way it goes. That's how we fucking roll.
That guy's great. I looked up, I forget what it is. I looked up 2 comics this week, and like the top Google results were Todd Klein like talking about these comics.
Interesting.
Yeah, like outside the context of lettering, but actually just being engaged with the comics themselves. And I love that kind of stuff. I like to see like other professionals looking at this stuff through their eye. So yeah, he's a fun guy to follow.
Jimmy, we got a lot of work to do before SPX, man. I feel like we better get the heck out of here.
Yeah, I agree, Ed.
All right, Kayfabers. We're on the road to 10,000, man. Make that shit happen. You can do so by subscribing to the channel, hit the like button, hit the bell, so that it notifies you whenever we have new videos going live.
And whenever we're live streaming.
That's for sure.
That's the best benefit of that bell right now. You can pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe merch from our spread shop. There's a link below the video to that. And if you already have the Cartoonist Kayfabe merch, make sure you're wearing it at SPX. I love seeing that.
That was going to be my sign-off to send you with the marching orders, because I was going to say that we are going to split, and we're going to come up with a suitable number for over and under bet when it comes to how many Kayfabe shirts we see at SPX this coming weekend, man. So in the meantime, just give them those marching orders and let's get the hell out of here, Jimmy.
Read more comics.